Hello, everyone. This is Kiddushin Daf Bey. It's the beginning of Kiddushin, and that's not a fake background. I'm recording live from the Laurentian Mountains in Quebec. Um, so let's begin. Haisha niknes b'shalosh drachim. A woman can be acquired, meaning married, in three ways. V'konas atzma b'shtei drachim, and she can acquire herself, meaning free herself from the marriage, um, in two ways. Niknes b'kesef b'shtar u'b'biyah. She can be acquired, and again, the word acquiring, the Gemara throughout refers to marriage as essentially a transaction. As we will see, we spend a lot of time on discussing, what are the two sides of the transaction. On one hand, the woman gives herself, as it were, suborns herself to the husband in exchange for something, of value. Um, so it's a very kind of technical consideration where when we deal with the act or the thing that validates or that affects the marriage, we're dealing with a technical question and not with a more holistic or romantic or view of the other things that comprise a marriage, which the Gemara also deals with. But in terms of what affects the marriage, we're talking about an acquisition because, as I said, it's a transaction, a two-sided transaction. When it's done with something of value. So Niknes Bekesef B'Sharabiyah, the three ways that you can affect a marriage are with money, and as Gemara will explain, it doesn't have to be cash, it could be something of value, Bishtar, with a contract, Ubabiyah, or with sexual relations. Bekesef, what does money mean? Beishamai Omrim, Bedinar, Ubishavadinar. Beis Shammai says with a coin, with cash, or with something of equivalent value, real value. Beis Hillel pruto b'shava pruta. So Beis Shammai says it's a minimum, which is a dinar, a larger sum, and Beis Hillel says a pruta b'shava pruta with the minimum. The pruta is the smallest coin that was in use. Kind of the minimum amount of cash that exists, or its equivalent value. Kama pruta, how much is a pruta? Echad mishmon of Isar Italki, 1/8 of the Italian Isar. Okay. And she can reacquire herself, free herself from the marriage with a divorce, or the death of the husband. Now, Hayavama, what about a Yavama, one who we've had a whole masach about this, of course, a woman whose husband dies and they're childless. She's expected to marry the brother of her husband, her late husband, Niknes Bavia. So there's no, since she's already kind of bound to him, the Gemara referred to it as Zika, because she's, they have a connection already. The only thing that affects that marriage, that makes it complete, is sexual relations. How does she free herself? With chalitza. So if she doesn't want to do this yibum marriage, then there's the chalitza ceremony, which frees her, or or if the yavam dies. So the Gemara says, Gemara is going to now go through a whole couple of pages of linguistic and stylistic things that don't really have anything to do with the with the topic of Kiddushin. But and if I remember correctly, this is a layer of the Gemara which is kind of post Talmudic. The generations known as the Savarim, which were between the Amoraim and the Gaonim. So it's kind of post Talmudic. It deals with issues of style and language. So Isha Niknes. So the Mishnah had started. Woman is acquired. Later on in the parak, we have a man can be mekadesh woman, can marry a woman. So what the Gemara is asking here is, why is it in the um, oh, why is it using the different language of being acquired or making a kiddushin? Um, because the first thing that we're going to discuss is kesef. A woman can be married through a financial transaction. Um, and the Kesef Minalan, and where do we get that idea from? There's a Xerashava. From the sale of the field of Ephron, Abraham purchased it to bury Sarah in Sefer Bereshis. When the Torah discusses marriage, it says when a man acquires a woman, yikach, he takes, or I think the better translation here is acquires. That same language of acquiring, the word kach, is used by Abraham when he purchases the fields from Ephron. Vikicha ikre kinyan. And now, so what does that have to do with us? Well, another synonym for acquiring, kicha, is kinyan. And how do I know that? Ksiv hasadah sharkana Abraham. In that same chapter, it refers to the field as the field which Abraham bought. Okay, so kana. So there's a synonym for kicha, which is kinyan, and so because that is the source of um, well, because that word that word that the Torah uses to describe a marriage is the same word as is used for a kinyan. So that's why the Mishnah uses the word kinyan here. Iname. Alternatively, Sados Bakasef Yiknu. Um, another another source for the idea that something that's bought with kasef is a kinyan. It's referred to as a kinyan is this pasuk. So they shall buy land with kasef. So Tani Haisha Nikne. So that's why when our Mishnah uses the word Haisha Nikne, the woman is acquired. All right, so fine. So if that's the case, if the best way to refer to marriage is a kinyan, so why does it say ha'ish mekadesh in the next in the further in further on in Kiddushin? Why does he use the word mekadesh? That he makes a Kiddushin with her. I don't know how to translate that best. He sanctifies her. That's not really right, but he singles her out. But basically marries her. But why use that word mekadesh? So there, if the best word to use is kinyan, as we've just demonstrated, so why don't you just make kara tani lishna daraisa l'basov tani lishna drabanan? Okay, our Mishnah is using the language that is used by the Torah for marriage, which is kicha. L'basov tani lishna darabanan. But the next source, Haish Makadesh, that uses a rabbinic term. What's this rabbinic term? Like, where does this come from? Why do we use the word kiddushin or ish mekadesh? He marries her with the word kiddushin because he is by marrying her, the man makes her forbidden to any other man. Right? It's an exclusive relationship. Just like Hekdesh is forbidden to anyone except for the temple. So in the Nehacha Ha'ish Kona, so now the Gemara says, okay, so that's why we use the term Kiddushin later on. So now the Gemara asks, Nehacha Ha'ish Kona, like why are we referring to the woman here? The woman becomes acquired. Why is it in the passive voice? Later we use the active voice, Ha'ish Mekadesh. The man marries her. So why don't we say here Ha'ish Kona? The man acquires her. And why do we say the woman is acquired? We shouldn't combine the Mishnah Seifa. That's because stylistically, look further in the Mishnah. V'konas atzma, that that she acquires herself. Okay, so there's the active voice. Now, if we're referring in the same Mishnah, in the same sentence to the woman, so in one case she's acquiring herself, in the other case she's being acquired. So we are using the active voice in the second part. We're using V'konas atzma, and so to maintain. It makes sense to refer to the woman being acquired in the first instance, and that's why the beginning is in the passive voice before we move on to the active voice. Um, so the beginning of the mission is also focused on her. Okay, so you want to be consistent with um, who is the party that we're dealing with. Like later on, we say Ha'ish Makadesh. So why don't we say here the man? Like if we're mixing passive and active voice, we do the same thing here with the man, not the woman. We could say the man acquires her, um, and he uh, gives away that acquisition. Makna, he gives the title, as it were, to someone else. Right? He gives her back her own independence. Um, so why don't we do that? Mishum deika misa sabal, because it's not just that he can give her a divorce and that he's being active, he can also die, in which he's being passive, right? You can't say he you know, it's we're not talking about suicides here. The love you kamakne, because that is not an action that the man takes, that the Baal takes. Um, it's something that happens to him. I mean, Shema Yehuda Maknila, that's something that God, as it were, is the active party, not the husband. The husband is passive in that case as well. Or you could say, Itana Kona Havamina Filu Bal Karcha. If we were going to focus on the man, saying the man can acquire the woman, it sounds like she has no part to play in this at all, and he can do it against her will. Um, so that's why we focus on the woman, because the woman has to play an active part here in the sense of agreeing to the transaction. Okay, so now we're done with that. So now we've satisfied the Gemara. The Gemara has satisfied itself in terms of why we're using the active versus the passive voice, and why we're focusing on the woman rather than the man. Whereas later on in the future para, we do it different. Okay, so now we're going to get to something more linguistic, grammatical, if you will. Why use the feminine term for three? Use the masculine term shlosha. Because drachim, the three ways. The word ways, derech lashon nekevahi, is a feminine noun. Diksiv, how do I know? This is in Devarim. No, not Devarim. And this is Yisro. Yisro is telling Moshe, you'll tell the people the way that they should go on. And the word derech, the way, is referred to in the feminine, ba, not bo. So the word derech is feminine. That's why b'shalosh drachim, which is the feminine form of three. So Gemara says, wait a minute, is derech really feminine? What about the following brisa? Shiva drachim bod kimas hazav. In 7 ways, the zav is tested, is checked, and the shiva drachim is the masculine word for 7. So why litnei shava? Why does it say the feminine word for 7? For 7, was it referring to drachim? Mishum dekaboy lemisnei derech of ashkachan derech diyikrei lashon zachar. Because derech is also sometimes uses the masculine. What's the word for formulation? The masculine conjugation. Dichsiv, here's the example. B'derech echad yitzu elecha u'b'shiva drachim yanusu lefanecha. So here, this is referring to the blessings in, I can't remember if it's in Bukuk Hosai or in Kisavo, but they will, your enemies will attack you in 1 column, but they will flee in 7 columns. And it uses the word drachim. And in fact, actually, in the word in the pasuk that we're dealing with, b'shiva drachim, bod kimas hazav, it actually, it's right there. It uses the word drachim in the masculine conjugation. So the Gemara says, well, wait a minute, yachi kashu kraya adade. So which is it? Is derech, the word derech, is it supposed to be conjugated masculine or feminine? There seems to be a contradiction here. And you have the same problem in the Mishnah, both in the Torah and the Mishnah. The word derech is used both, sometimes in a masculine conjugation, sometimes feminine. So Gemara answers as follows: and I don't have a problem with the Torah's, with the way the Torah uses both of those. So what is the derech we're talking about? The derech where the Torah uses the feminine conjugation, haderech yelchu ba, the way that they should behave. That is talking about Torah. Torah is the way they should behave, and Torah and that is feminine. Here's another example of Torah where it's used to with the feminine conjugation. But in the passage which refers to war, which refers to your enemies and how they will flee in seven columns, seven paths. So since we're talking about war is typically waged by men and not women. So we'll refer to derech. The derech of war is we're going to conjugate as a masculine noun. So that's resolves why the Torah does it differently. The Mishnah we don't have a problem with either. Here in our Mishnah, where we're talking about ha'isha niknes, so we use shalosh drachim because we're talking about the woman is the party we're focusing on. So we use the word shalosh, which is the feminine conjugation. Hasam in the other case, when we talk about the B'shiva Drachim Bokim V'Sazav, we're talking about typically about a male, about a man being checked, because it is more typical for a man to check himself for Zav. Because a woman can also become Tame, like without actively doing anything, without being without active or having a Zav incident. So that's why since it's more applicable to men, we use the masculine conjugation. So the Gemara says, well, wait a minute. My tamatani shalish b'shim drachim nitnei devarim. Like, so don't use the word drachim. Like, if you want to be consistent and use the word shlosha, I'm not sure why that is better, right? But like, why is we have a preference for one over the other? But like, why use the word derech? Use the word davar, devarim, shlosha devarim. 3 ways you could say in a way that is definitely the masculine conjugation. Because one of the ways is through sexual intercourse, sexual relations. And that is called a derech, not a davar. From the Navi, the way of a man with a woman is so too is the way of a woman committing adultery. So their derech is clearly referring to sex. So if that's why since we're talking about 3 ways, and one of the ways is sexual, and that is referred to as derech, that's why we prefer the Mishnah prefers the use of the word derech to davar, drachim to dvarim, and therefore we're using the word shalosh and not shlosha. So okay, that applies to the 3rd way. What about the other 2 ways, money and contract, that you can marry someone? Mishum. So yes, because they go along. Like if you're mentioning 3 things, and one of them has a compelling reason to use the feminine conjugation rather than the masculine, so both drag the others along with it. The Gemara says, wait, Tani Tarta to Chada. Like, well, if there are 2 other, you have 3 things, and one of them leads you to use the word derech, and the other 2 do not. The other 2 are maybe more typically referred to as devarim. So if you're referring to the group of 3, go with the noun that typically would refer to the 2 and not the 1. So what's this Hanach Nami Tzarech Biyaninu? Yeah, sure. There are two other ways to affect the marriage, but eventually the marriage involves sex. So so that's why that is kind of the one that's highlighted, or that the Mishnah chooses to conjugate around. Um, or you could say, Hamani Rabbi Shimon. You could say this is according to Rabbi Shimon. The Tanya Rabbi Shimon, why does the Torah use uh, the active voice when a man takes a woman, rather than when a woman is taken by a man, a passive voice? Because it's more typical for the man to ask the woman rather than vice versa. Um, Mashallah, Adam Sha'avdallah. Why is that? It's like a person who lost something. Michazer al mi. Who's going looking for the lost thing? Baal Aveda Machazer al the one who lost something. He's the one um, who goes looking. So this is obviously a reference to the story in Bereshit of how woman was created. That God took a piece from man's side and made a woman out of it. So man is going around looking for his lost piece, right? His lost limb. And so he's the one that's asking, like, will you marry me? Okay, like, come back to me, as it were. So this answers why we focus on the woman in this Mishnah, which we answered before. But here's a different answer that Rabbi Shimon gives. That why would you refer to? One second. Oh, why? Yeah. Why? Sorry. Why does the Torah use the active voice of the man takes a woman or requires a woman? Because he's the one that's looking for his lost piece. But what about the Mishnah? Okay, so we mentioned before 7 ways that the zav is checked, like that, and we're using the masculine conjugation. Like, why does it use drachim there? It should use devarim if that's a more typical. Like, I understand now that for the purposes of marriage, we prefer to use the word derech. But what about the zav? Like, why use the word drachim rather than dvarim? There it tells you that there's ways, like there are paths to becoming a zav. There are things that lead you to becoming a zav, like eating too much and drinking too much. Okay, so this is maybe a good place to stop. So we will finish here and pick up on Wednesday from Vahaditnan. Have a good day, everyone.